It's 10 times the terror.
Hello there. Getting old and senile.
Hello, and welcome to 10 Times the Terror. This is Paul. My co-host Ralph is not with us today, but we have several others. We're very happy to have it with us again, Hunter Carson, who was here before, and my son James,
hello,
and his friend Danny Knitzer are here as well. And we're going to be focusing on the current film, A Quiet Place Part 2. Which, as we're recording this, has just been open for a couple of weeks. So we'll begin. I'm going to turn this over to my son, who's really put most of the work in putting some of the themes and questions together. So go ahead, James.
Thank you, Dad. But before we get started on our review of A Quiet Place Part 2, Dad, you are turning 75 soon, which some might say is the real 10 times the terror. So we thought from all of us here at 10 times the terror, we'd get a little something for you, which maybe you could open on air.
A live reveal.
Live reaction.
Aye.
Turn the camera so Hunter can see.
Yeah. All right. You see, Hunter?
What'd you get?
I don't know. We're gonna wait and see.
It's a square box.
The Euro Crypt of Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee's European films.
Oh,
wonderful.
That's terrific.
Sounds like I've never been released in the
Yes,
U.S.
right. 8 Blu-ray discs. Woo! Holy
Wow.
mac!
What are the names?
The names of those: Crypt of the Vampire, Castle of the Living Dead, Torture Chamber of Dr. Sadism, Challenge the Devil, Theater Macabre. I mean, these are not films I've ever seen, you know. These are all Castle of the Living Dead, and directed by Terrence Fisher, Sherlock Holmes and the Deadly Necklace. With Lee playing Holmes.
Wow, season 2 material right here.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Very cool.
We figure the author of Good versus Evil in the films of Christopher Lee should have this in the collection.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Alrighty, so now we will be talking about A Quiet Place Part 2. We will kind of go into very kind of non-spoiler general discussions before indicating when we'll be discussing spoilers. So for anyone who has not seen the film, we will give a clear warning when that happens. Worth noting, a couple facts. Quiet Place Part 2 had its world premiere on March 8th, 2020. But of course, this was right before the pandemic. And
yeah, right.
My
Lots of
29th
luck.
birthday, we were going to go see it, and that did not happen. But so then had its theatrical release this past Memorial Day, May 28th, 2021, and is the highest opening weekend of the entire pandemic. So maybe theaters are back, hopefully.
Yeah.
So I'd say let's start with Danny, who's making his debut on 10 Times the Terror. In non-spoiler terms, what'd you think of A Quiet Place Part 2?
Oh, I thought it was awesome, and I thought, without getting into too specific, I really liked the way that they were able to build on the world building of the first movie and sort of expand it while keeping the spirit of the first one in line. I thought, all the familial themes were just as strong as in the first one. And then, of course, like the classic tropes of, all zombie or post-apocalyptic movies where, you don't just have to fear the monsters, you have to fear the people who become monsters. And I just thought, really well executed, not a lot of fat on the movie. I was a big fan. I think it was comparable to the first one in quality. What about you, James?
Okay, yeah. I mean, I was a big fan of the first movie, and I can tell you when I first heard a sequel was announced, I was kind of like, I don't think we need a sequel. It's a tight movie. I agree with what Danny's saying. I thought it was as good, if not better than the first one. I thought it expanded the world in a lot of ways that kind of sequels are expected to, but still retained a lot of the sort of minimalist approach. I think Krasinski really proves himself as a director with both these movies. I mean, I think the opening sequence alone, I won't get into it yet, but like he really shows his knack for sequences. It's tense, it's thrilling, and I mean, definitely if you haven't been back to a theater, I'd say this is a good film to return to theaters for.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and talking about the first film from a religious perspective, you've got the whole idea at the climax, and I hope this is not a spoiler alert for the first film. where the father sacrifices himself for the family. It deliberately makes a noise that brings out the creatures. And that's the essence of redemptive sacrifice, which is at the very heart of Christian faith, as well as some other faiths, but very much so the idea of, Christ dies on the cross, taking upon himself all the things that are against us. Same thing here, the Father takes upon himself the full force of the aliens to save his family. And so where do you go after that? Because that's pretty foundational. Where do you go, the next point of that theologically, religiously, symbolism is the rescue. That Jesus' redemptive action on the cross rescues humanity from the power of evil. Well, this film has a tremendous focus on the rescue theme. And again, we don't want to give stuff away on it. But I agree with kind of my son's first reaction, like, where do you go? And we've talked about the fact that very few sequels measure up, especially in the horror sci-fi. Yours was a remake, actually, so it wasn't a sequel, a remake.
Correct, it was a remake.
Most of all, what you get in horror film remakes are like the Spider-Woman Strikes Back type of thing. It's really just,
You can smell the cash grab.
Yeah, right. The one exception would be Bride of Frankenstein. That say surpasses the original Frankenstein. But no, I think another thing too is it's only about 90 minutes. Is that correct?
97 minutes.
I think one general criticism of films I have in general right now is they're way too long. And we just saw one the other day. You could have cut 15 minutes out of it with no loss of anything. In fact, it would have made the film better. But this film is tight and keeps moving. And this is not when you want to be going to the snack stand to get some more popcorn. You want to be right there on the screen.
So, Hunter, you haven't seen this yet, but you have seen the first one, correct?
I have seen the first one. Thank you for that. I think Minimalist, I'll draw from what y'all were saying, is great. I think A Quiet Place, the original one, is really fantastic. I would say that I would give it 9.5 terrors out of 10 terrors. I like that film.
Right.
I'm looking forward to seeing A Quiet Place too. I want to build on what you said about the character, Krasinski's character, making the sacrifice. When I saw when I watched A Quiet Place, it was inside of one of those theaters where they bring you food, and I'll tell you, the first sequence, it's 15 or 20 minutes long in the original Quiet Place, is so well done. And directing, sound design, I'll get to sound design later, the cinematography, all of it is so well done that the entire theater full of people were absolutely quiet. And when a waitress came in and dropped the plate of food, literally everybody went, shh.
Yeah, right.
Sheer fear.
Aliens will come and get us.
They will come and get us. But I want to bring back that ending sequence that you said. It reminded me of Them. Them exclamation point, a movie that we reviewed. If you haven't seen that review, go check it out, and also check out that movie Them, because the characters sacrifice themselves. And I think that is an expression of religiosity. If I'm using the word wrong, please forgive me. It is a religious expression, that bit of sacrifice. I think it's good. And I also want to note that A Quiet Place Part 1, the first one, had been nominated, did not win, for sound design on the Academy Awards. It won several other awards for sound design. And it's a quiet film. And I think for me, I want to sort of wax on that a little bit, because the film in a way is about listening. And I truly feel that in my life, and if I'm just speaking for myself, that's fine. I really think that God listens, and I really think that God listens to humanity, and having a quiet place in our heart for prayer is a good thing. So that's my analogy. Thank you very much. I can't wait to hear the spoilers.
Yes, no, for sure.
Are we going to go ahead and spoil 2 for Hunter, or what's the deal here? What are we
I'm
doing?
ready.
You've
Let's
made
do
your
it.
own sacrifice being on this episode.
Yeah, right.
So we will, I think, at this point now, kind of transition into spoilers. So again, for anyone except for Hunter who has not seen A Quiet Place 2, feel free to come back afterwards. So I guess 3, 2, 1. Well, so Hunter, kind of actually going off what you're saying about the opening sequence, I agree. The opening of the first movie is almost like a little short film. It's really effective. It's not, since one of my favorite horror films, Scream, has that kind of like opening scene that is like almost its own short film, but kind of like sets up the film so well. But I think this movie kind of mirrors that structure well, because it's the only scene with John Krasinski, because it's like a flashback to the first day, and you see some of it in the trailers, but basically seeing how it all kind of goes down, and it's really thrilling. It's really hyper intense. But I think kind of also going off what you're talking about with the sound design, I think what's so effective in both movies is you have one of the daughters is deaf, and so you have so many moments where we're getting her perspective where there is no sound. It is nothing. And the way this movie sort of goes back and forth between that and that building that tension and then cutting to what we're hearing is really, really well done.
I like that for sure. And yeah, I mean, I think what I thought was so great and, bat free about both movies is the fact that in the first movie, all you see of the world before the invasion, whatever you want to call it, is, the little flashback of their son who tragically died by setting off the loud rocket. And in this movie, the only flashback you see of the events before the monsters came is the first, 10-minute scene?
Yeah.
And I just thought it tells you everything you need to know about their community, about their family, their values, their small little town, which we did not see any of besides a pharmacy in the first movie. And, we get to see like what the townsfolk are like.
Yeah.
And, obviously introduce Cillian Murphy's character very successfully.
Well, even just the setting of a baseball game, it's almost like the whole town comes together for an event like that.
Totally.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite horror stories. Speaking of Sherlock Holmes, is The Hound of the Baskervilles, which has an opening prologue like this, especially the Hammer version, which is the origin of the curse that comes on the family in the form of this demonic hound. But and one of the things that's classic in that story is I think the climax is a series of crosscuts in the Hollywood version, cross-cutting between the victim, the last of the Baskervilles, walking alone on the moors, the hound chasing after him, Holmes and Watson trying to get to him, the heroines trying to figure out where he is. One of the things that's very, very effective in Hiding Place, in Quiet Place 2, is the cross-cutting. And one comment that I remember seeing is that people don't often take into account how effective or how much a film depends on good editing.
Oh yeah.
Yes, you have to have good direction, you have to have good script, but editing can be tremendously important. And one of my favorite directors, and I wrote a book on him, Terence Fisher, was originally an editor, and then went in to do all these great, classic Gothic horror films, not just Hound of the Baskervilles, but Frankenstein, Dracula, Jekyll and Hyde, and so forth. And this film is really, and I think what it is, I think one of the questions we had to talk about here is how similar is horror to comedy?
And sorry, I want to hear that. Before you get into that, I just want to note that for John Krasinski, for a lot of people, is Jim from The Office. Mm-hmm. So similar to like Jordan Peele with Get Out, he's known for a comedy background, but has transitioned to making horror filmmaking. So I just wanted to say that, but then go ahead talking about comedy.
Comedy is timing, so much.
Build up, and you have to build.
Yeah, right. The same joke told by two different people, can be very different. One can fall flat, the other one can be really funny. And one example would be like thinking that crosses over into horror a lot is Abbott and Costello. Met all these monsters in the classic Hollywood tradition of Frankenstein and the Mummy and the Invisible Man and so forth. And their whole shtick, and of course the famous "Who's on first," and if you know all that stuff, is they knew just how long to have a joke go. If it went too long, it lost power, and if it was too short, it didn't have the full effect. And so how I'm transitioning this over, for example, here's one famous one, and in Abbott and Costello is something simple like Costello's driving a bus, and he's there with Abbott, and he's telling me he's got to back up, so he's back up. Okay, I'm ready. All right, go ahead. Wait, do you want me to back up or you want me to go ahead? It's like, no, I told you to back up. All right, go ahead. And it just goes long enough, and then they stop it. Timing, and that's definitely the rescue sequences where you got three of them.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm giving a spoiler. Three of them. The amount of time each one gets before you go on to the next one and come back again.
Which goes back to what you're saying about editing.
Editing. I would say this is a film where, the direction is good, the acting is good, script is good, but the editing also is very, very good and creates suspense.
Well, I think too, it's worth noting. We mentioned sort of the runtime. I think both comedy and horror, most of the time, traditionally are like under 2 hours, because I think having a tight runtime is necessary for that kind of build up, execution, delivery. You go on too long and you've lost the momentum.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
Another thing about editing, obviously I've been involved in that. Going back in my memory to Invaders from Mars, when we were working in between takes, and that would be like if we have to move some stuff around or make a transition, we would take a break. And so during that break, Tobe Hooper would go back and work on editing his other film. And it was really interesting to see the director, Tobe Hooper, sort of draw from the film he was editing in the trailer and bring that knowledge into what the next sequence of events would be in the shots that we are filming currently on Invaders from Mars. So, I know that directors really work very diligently, and it's sort of a team as an editor and a director, and it's a really cool sort of symbiotic relationship with the editor and the director. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It's very important to note that there's a lot of hardworking people on these films that are absolutely working together to create art.
Oh yeah, and I think like to add to that, one thing that really worked for me, like specifically in the second movie, was I think like right after the exposition, right after the daughter, I just looked her name up, it's her the deaf daughter is Reagan. Right after she sets out on her own little mission to find this radio station beyond the sea, she goes into this rail car, classic horror trope, and then there's like this great red herring of this huge noise, and these birds just fly through a hole in the car, and that doesn't bring the monsters. What brings the monster is later on when she's walking through the rail car, she grabs like a first aid box, and then the door collapses on her from the weight of like a decaying body, and she screams, and that's what brings the monster. And I just think like that like the timing, the editing of like just quiet to like bird chirps, and then her scream, and just like not knowing which event is going to bring the monsters, but just the inevitability that they will come, I just thought worked so perfectly.
Absolutely. Well, I think what's so clever about this idea for a movie is because you're in this whole world where any sound could potentially draw a monster. You don't know what will, what won't. You're kind of always sort of at unease, because you're right. It could be a little noise. It could be a big noise. It could not be a noise, but so you're always kind of like on the edge of your seat, waiting to see what's about to happen.
And a crucial theme that gets lost in like the modern horror film. It's very important. Again, this is a theological theme. Goes back to St. Augustine, that evil is self-destructive. And what also you see in this film is it's the sound that activates the aliens, but the sound moved up to a higher pitch destroys them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the thing that's the source of their strength is also the source of their destruction, which is very much classic horror and classic classic theology. So that's another thing I really appreciated in the film, that you have that point. You can't just have the monster run rampant and nobody can stop it. That kind of happens in the 70s, with Exorcist and The Omen and some of these films where evil just seems to run away with everything. It doesn't work that way. And the moments where they move up the pitch, I guess is the pitch of the
cochlear implants.
Right. The implants. And you hear the shrieking of the aliens. It's like in the Bible, the demons shrieking when they're being cast out. Very effective.
Well, especially I think also even kind of leading all the way up to the very end, and how this movie very much I think complements the first film, is that where the first film had John Krasinski being the sacrifice, by the end you have the two kids sort of taking care of the parents.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones taking the lead against the monsters. And you have, again, that editing where you're cutting back and forth between in the radio station, in the hatch.
Yeah.
But the two kids are the ones sort of confronting the monster head on.
And then also taking care of the baby. So it's, it's cross-generational, the parents and the baby,
Yeah. Well, and again, I think, it's such a clever idea for a horror film, like monsters that hunt by sound. But if it was only that, it would be a gimmick. And I think because there's so much more substance to the characters and the themes, it makes both films such a richer experience.
Yeah, and sound is so important to horror films. All you have to do is look at the silent horror films, which can be very effective, but it's not the same as having the sound. The unmasking of the Phantom, of course, Phantom of the Opera, and you go a few years ahead of that to Mystery of the Wax Museum, which has just been restored on Blu-ray and everything, which is early sound. There's an unmasking where the heroine is shrieking, which is Fay Ray, who's the scream queen, But it adds a whole other dimension to having the sound.
I have a question for you, Paul. Because James mentioned the three panes of action, which do you think was the best, and what were some maybe overall thoughts of those three? We're talking about obviously the daughter and I think Cillian Murphy's character is named Emmett, going to find this place beyond the sea where they can transmit.
I think that was ingenious that this whole song becomes a clue,
Yes.
And I think it was very effective in a film where sound is deadly, to have a deaf mute, be a critical heroine.
Yeah.
So I would.
Well, and also you have sorry, hunters, we're getting full spoil. You have the scene where they arrive on the island, and it kind of becomes clear that the monsters can't swim. So that's sort of they're in a bit of a safety zone, and that's a good point where you, the audience, are kind of lulled into a sense of comfort.
Mm-hmm.
But then as soon as Cillian Murphy sees the boat that has the claw marks in it, he immediately goes in a hyper mode of get everyone inside, but already it's too late. That's the lull before you're instantly back into that intense state of stress. Okay, yeah. So I know, Dad, you mentioned Bride of Frankenstein, but I want to ask. I mean, you're right. I mean, in the horror genre, the number of really good sequels are far and few. But I want to know, are there any others that are kind of worth mentioning? One that I put down was Dawn of the Dead. I personally prefer Night of the Living Dead, but Dawn of the Dead is very iconic. Really modernized the zombie genre.
Yeah. I know. I have to say there's very few. There's in film in general, you have more. I mean, for example, I would argue Tarzan and his mate is better than Tarzan the Ape Man type of thing. It's like a film because in the series they got more of a control of the thing, But by and large, no, it's Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman of the old Universal films is a good sequel, but it's not really eclipsing the Wolfman. So No, I think Bride of Frankenstein is an anomaly, but Bride of Frankenstein almost doesn't fit any category. Yeah, is it a horror film? Is it a morality failure? Is it a satire?
I think it's a love story. I love that movie. Great movie. I totally think it's a love story.
Yeah, it's a love story.
You could
right?
probably say one of your favorite directors, Terrence Fisher, made some good sequels. I mean, Dracula, Prince of Darkness.
Yeah, those are
Frankenstein
good, but I don't think any of them would hold. Well, I mean, Brides of Dracula, but that's not even a sequel, really. So, Revenge of Frankenstein, Dracula, they're good, but they're not going to supplant the original.
Right.
As I said, it's more the case of like the Spider-Woman Strikes Back kind of a thing,
Right. Or just like abandoning the horror genre entirely, like with T2 and Aliens. Like they're not horror movies.
Right.
Yeah,
They're
They go
action
more
movies.
action.
Yeah, you're right.
Good point.
Right.
Very good point. Okay, well, I mean, I guess we can kind of begin to wrap up here. But so some of my closing thoughts were just like, has John Krasinski, in your opinion, kind of solidified himself in this genre? I mean, these are I think he made a couple like kind of smaller films before A Quiet Place, but like these are the two that really put him on the map. And so, I mean, I personally would love to see him continue, whether or not with this franchise or something else, continue in this genre because he clearly has the skill for it.
Part of this new generation includes Jordan Peele.
Sure.
Ari Aster.
Yeah, right. And also still includes Guillermo del Toro. So we're really living in the 21st century with a renaissance of horror sci-fi, which had kind of bottomed out in the 80s and 90s with like the became known as torture porn. Just all these
Another great
bloodbath kind of
sequel,
horror.
Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan,
Yeah,
which I saw on cable during Halloween once.
Oh, gee. Next will be Friday the 13th, Part 14.
Yeah.
I do think that John Krasinski has solidified himself in this genre. As soon as it comes out on Paramount Plus, I'm going to check out Quiet Place 2. But just based on the first one, he did make a couple of movies that I think are admittedly just sort of getting into the director role and sort of discovering what somebody does as a director. I think that was hard work that he put in, which is really my hat's off to him, rather than jumping right in to something so mainstream as A Quiet Place. Someone like Krasinski, who's comes from an acting background, obviously has worked with great talented people and is putting in the hard work. I can't wait to see what happens next.
And it's worth noting that I think the first movie he had a co-writing credit, but this one he had full writing. So I mean, he wrote, directed, and partially starred. So I mean, he's really showing his talent here.
Definitely.
Okay. Any other closing thoughts on A Quiet Place Part 2?
No, I think I think both the films are major accomplishments, and they've got spiritual themes that really enhance them.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I mean, and again, if we do get a Part 3, I'm excited. As long as John Krasinski's on board, I like what he's doing here, and yeah, I mean, I agree. It has enough layers to it, but also there's so many ways to explore this type of story and how you can sort of play with sound, play with visual. So yeah, I mean, I'm all aboard for more if we get more. All right, well then, Dad, do you want to kind of?
It's been great to have this chance to explore what I think is a very worthwhile, very effective horror film.
Absolutely.
So that's all for now, and we look forward to talking to you next time.
We want to thank our guests for being with us today, especially Hunter Carson. And we want to thank Danny Knitzer, who is a friend of my son, James, who's also been with us before. And we look forward to having you with us again. Take care. This has been 10 Times the Terror.
Thank you very much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's a wrap.
Settle it on.
That was good. That was fun.
That was really fun.
Thank you for listening to
It's 10 Times the Terror.
the podcast.
You are impossible.
Falcon, your well-intentioned but totally wrong. Thank you for listening to 10 Times the Terror. This podcast would not be possible without listeners like you. You can find out more about our podcast by visiting our website, 10timestheterror.com. That's 10xtheterror.com.